Sometimes we need to read a book, and instead of reading bitches, we're reading books.
Period.
So pack your bags, everyone. We're going to Fire Island. It's 1978, and the party's about to start. When I thought about this podcast, Bootsies Book Club and Such, I was talking with my amazing co-host. I know you guys know him. Hey, Coco.
How you doing?
And it was like, it's going to be very calm and like very, demure, and very serious. We're going to read this book. And, I had to think about it, and it's not a way to plan something for me. And there is just too much personality up in this room, and there is no demure. There is no such thing. So Bootsy's Book Club and Such,
I'm glad you said it.
we're ready to get to reading. We're ready to hashtag read bitches and books.
And also hashtag Bootsies Book Club and Such.
I love it.
Now he knew very well that this young man's beauty was just that, a fact, his beauty, and that he, Malone, could not worship it, or worse, the fault of so many people he knew still, possess it, consume it, digest it. The boy's beauty became for Malone, as he lay there on the grass, watching him run around in those clouds of white dust, handsome as a myth on the plain of Troy, an impersonal fact, as impersonal as the beauty of a tree or a sky or a seacoast, a fact that did not compel him to embrace it any more than it seemed necessary for him to embrace a particularly lovely copper beach.
Reading Dancer from the Dance, which is a 1978 gay novel by Andrew Holleran about gay men in New York City and Fire Island. What a story. How have you been, Coco? Are you enjoying the book so far?
And it's not just New York and Fire Island, honey. It's the tri-state area.
The tri-state area.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, if you're talking about New York, it is tri-state, baby. It is all the things.
That I love. And it's such a fantasy, right? And I've had so much relaxing times just getting into this book, and it was recommended by a good friend of ours, and it's really been amazing to read. And it starts off as the idea of basically like a group of friends, right? And it starts off with some letters that are going back and forth, and they're basically reminiscing about old times in Fire Island, the scene back in the day, and just all the memories. And that is what inspires the beginning of the book. And just to get through the letters before the actual start of the chapter was really fun and telling of what's to be told.
Yeah, it's heavy. Those letters, I think there's 6. Heavy.
There's 6 letters.
I like the one that talked about how they picked up their letters once a week, and they were in a rural area. You can kind of hear by the way they wrote the letter that they want them to keep writing them, but it takes them a minute sometimes to write back.
I know, it's cool to see like I can imagine, we both have such like old friends, for that we've done so many things together, and it's really this like group of friends that were, besties, and just probably partied it up, and are now in a place of their lives where it's not that anymore, but there's a reflection on the good old times. And just a snippet of one of the letters.
Wait, not the good old times.
The good old times. It reads, "Your novel might serve a historical purpose, if only because the young queens nowadays are utterly undistinguishable from straight boys. The 20-year-olds are completely calm about being gay. They do not consider themselves doomed. Someone should record the madness, the despair of the old-time queens, the great queens whose stories, unlike Elizabeth of Austria, have never been told. Sutherland, she who must be obeyed, and Epstein, the true loonies of this society, refusing to camouflage themselves for society's sake.
Period.
I mean,
It's true. I mean, even now, it's, I guess you would be the kids at that time, right?
I could.
Yeah, like it would have been like, you think about each generation and like us looking at these younger people and like they're doing things different. And it's like, yeah, it's different, but it's still there. There's still the sparkle, still it becomes less, I think, which I think is very sad. I think that, being gay now, a lot of people just, it's becoming this almost norm, and people just are just becoming almost like lambs in the wild,
Right.
and I think that a lot of people forget like where it all came from, and like how hard they worked for us to have what we have now.
Right. I mean, it was free love, it was full of sex. It was full of really expressing who you were with little worry, right? And this novel really takes place on like the brink of AIDS, and it hasn't necessarily hit yet, but it's happening and it's starting to creep in. And you know there was not really a care in the world. I mean, the drugs were there, the sex, the just the party, and it was a time to live. It really was. And you going down this memory lane with them really um puts you in that place of wow. I almost wish we could go back to that. Like everyone should have that moment. Everyone should be able to have that. But from these letters starts the story of just looking back on these summers of Fire Island with the characters Monroe and Sutherland. And were there anything in the letters that stood out to you?
Like I said before, the part about that one specifically. I mean, each one had its own like story that was, the letters aren't long, but you really understood who these people were, and you really understood what they were going through. And these, it was in a time where people were like, hiding out, really. And people were not, out and living. They were kind of hiding. And there was few places of refuge, which I think that's what Fire Island was and is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into chapter 1, and we'll
Well, is there any parts of the letters that you were like, because, I think that whoever's going to go on this journey with us should read this book and really go through this. But is there any parts that like,
well, you're going to get to see a back and forth amongst friends, and really, they're just like, okay, you're going to write a book, like let's do it. Don't make it too long. Don't. Keep it juicy. And the narrator, says like, I'm not changing names. This is
period.
This is real. And sometimes the truth is all the imagination you need. There's really you can't make stuff up sometimes.
Yeah.
And even in life currently, like you can live in truth and also feel like you're in a movie at the same time. And I can go back to many times in my early 20s, and just the amount of chaos and shenanigans and trickery that I participated in, one may not believe, but
I think that one day you should put it down. But I really agree with what you're saying about how it kind of goes down to this simple saying, like, like we all get to like live our lives, right? And all this stuff is happening around us. And a lot of times we let like our ego get in the way of like who we actually are. And we are afraid of what people are going to think of us, right? And reading this book made me realize like, okay, we all were given a role. We all are, this is who we are. The role is who we are. So are we going to like play it, or are we not going to play it? And we're going to act like we're somebody else? Or are we just going to be ourselves? Because in the end, that's all that matters. And we can only show up if we actually allow ourselves to look at ourselves to be like, yes, that's who I am, and I am okay with that, and I love that. And it's so important,
Right.
for everyone, especially now because people are living in an alternate universe.
Right. I mean, the floodgates opened, because our past is our past, and
our past is our
and so yeah, I just loved the letters, back and forth, and so you guys will get into it and join us at any time. Get the book, play it in your car ride, in the morning. Chill out with your little dog in the evening and find a cozy place and get caught up with us. Join us now. Join us next week. And getting into chapter 1, we'll hear a reading from our friend Summer.
Oh, thank you, Summer.
And what
I saw in a discotheque one winter, but it was I who ended up going back to Fire Island to pick up his things. Now, my father used to say, and I agree, there is nothing so unhappy as going through the clothes of a friend who has died, to see what may be used and what should be given to charity. But Malone was hardly even a friend, and something much more, much less, perhaps. And so it felt odd to be traveling out there yesterday afternoon. It was a fine autumn day, the last week of October, and as the taxi drove from the train station in Sayville to the docks, that village had never looked more attractive. There was an unspoken celebration in the very silence of the end of that long summer season, when 100 taxis a day like ours crisscrossed the streets between the train station and the docks, taking the inhabitants of Manhattan across that shallow bay to their revelries on the beach of Fire Island.
That has a memory of a moment in the past, and
if you've ever been there, it's like there's like such a vibe in that part of New York. It's different. It's almost like you're in a whole different existence, and the way that you get around, the way that people look, and I can only imagine what it looked like then,
right,
and how beautiful like it must have been to leave the city to then go to this oasis of like almost like simplicity and like just simple. I mean, there's no cars on Fire Island.
I know, and I still have never been to Fire Island. It's been a dream of mine, and I cannot wait to experience it.
I honestly would can't wait to go now, because it'd be a totally different experience than it would have been, 5 years ago.
Right.
And I would still love to see it and like go do a few things and then like go do my own thing.
Right.
And see the seediness and see how seedy it still is.
Right. There will be no quaaludes involved.
No quashlush.
And yeah, what a moment that's going to be.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts is like, it's in the first page of chapter 1. There's an entry that it's not very long, but I really think it kind of sums up visually what it looks like there. It was a journey between islands. After all, from Manhattan to Long Island to Fire Island, and then the last island of the 3 was nothing but a sandbar, as slim as the, what's that word? Parentheses, enclosing the Atlantic, the very last fringe of soil on which a man might build his house and leave behind him all, absolutely all.
It's beautiful.
I mean, it just really like, we make life so difficult. It's really not.
Right.
You disappear if you want to.
You can, and I feel like I'm there, It's such a sentimental story, and there's so much love in this. There's love and loss, right? Like throughout the chapter, you get you get the experience that so many people also passed away, so many lives were lost, whether it was drug use, sexual, maybe something,
Yeah.
crime, or just an accident. There was a scene of someone died in the swimming pool just
Yeah.
trying to sniff poppers at the bottom of the pool, and took them out, and
It's honestly like a very true storytelling of like our community, and how I can only imagine what they went through, because I think about when I came out and when I had this journey, right? And how I was so blessed to have a mom that supported me, but so many people don't have that and didn't have that. And if you think about it, it is our community has been through so much, and people may not like our community, and they have to remember like a lot of things that have happened are because of this neglect that these people had, because their families didn't want anything to do with them, thought something was wrong with them. And I think it's such an important part of reading this book, and people that are not queer, to understand that there is so much that has happened, and there's so much in this book that I just can like foresee it. It is going to be heavy, but you're going to learn a lot.
right.
Like with no sugar, just straightforward, like I used to drink vodka water with 2 lemons, Just
Yes.
nasty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dirty martini, extra dirty.
Yeah. I'm all dirty martini, hold the olive juice, hold the olives, just the vodka.
And so the boys, went summer after summer after summer to Fire Island.
Yeah.
And it changed. It changed yearly, seasonally, and there was always a new hot trade.
Oh, I love that word.
Ready to serve it up to the queens. And
Can you say what trade means, just so that
trade
not everyone knows what that
is
means.
an idea of someone with an ultimate sex package, head to toe.
Yeah.
That
Like who's the trade of the day?
the trade of the day that the surrounding group wants, or would ideally
I love that.
be, the top pick of, the bunch.
For example, there's five queens standing together, and someone's like, okay, like spot the trade,
Right.
and to see what how everyone responds. Sometimes it's the same one, sometimes it's different ones, but
Right.
it's the look, it's the vibe.
real. So the boys are going back and forth, and Malone is saying, I'm not spending next summer here. I'll go out west. I'll live in a tent in Africa. I'll do anything but waste another summer on the island. And Sutherland responds, waste, said Sutherland, turning his head slightly as if he had heard a bird chirp behind him in the bushes. Who can waste a summer on the island? Why, it's the only antidote to death we have. Besides, he said, blowing out a stream of smoke, you know very well that if you did go to Africa, you would be lying in your tent among gazelles and lions, and you would not even pull back the flap to look at them, because you will be wondering only who is dancing with Frank Post and whether Lewis is playing Law of the Land. Don't be a fool, he said. Don't think for a moment of escaping. You can't.
It's true. It's kind of like our refuge with San Francisco. Like the same vibe, of like this place of like safety and like and community. It's kind of beautiful and sick at the same time.
Right.
Because that's just what it is. It's not easy. Even today, it's not easy to be us. It's not easy with people. People do not love us all the time.
No. And, so as much as they try to talk each other out of, okay, maybe I'm not going to do Fire Island this summer.
Yeah.
It always circled back to like, of course you are. Like, you can't, there's no time to waste. You're not going to waste a beat, somewhere else. You need to be right here. So
yeah,
it always came back to Fire Island. And in some sense, it's a throwback to like all of our past lives of, I remember for many years it maybe it was a summer gay pride event.
Mm.
You know, your boys or your crew, like it was constantly, therefore planning. And it was, these moments throughout the year that each year you were looking forward to it. And those moments drift off at some point. People maybe grow up, people do different things, and people change. And
Yeah.
um, I think that's what we're gonna see over time here with Malone and Sutherland, and like what things have to, things will change. Things
I
are
wonder what
changing.
will happen. Like, I wonder if they're gonna go back and forth, because Mullen has passed away, but are they gonna go back in time a bit? Because it's such a, in some ways, I hope they start it at the end,
Right,
and then they go back and they get a little messy,
right.
because it's the way that they describe going and picking up his clothes and going through his clothes, and it's such a powerful thing because also gay men, specifically queer people, they a lot of them didn't have family that wanted anything to do with them, so their friends are the ones that, when things happen, they would go through their things and they would, you know keep the things. And like if your family member dies, like you have to go through it, and it's like our family was chosen, and even to today it's still chosen, and it was such a powerful note to start on in chapter 1, like the end of this epic, like, relationship.
Hmm.
And even how he describes, like, how he fell in love with him, and it just never ended. It was just
Right.
never ended.
He was. It always. Everyone compared to
Yes,
that love.
everyone compared to it or didn't compare at all.
Right.
You know?
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I, I this whole reading, at first I was very nervous about it.
Talk about it.
And because and when I say that, I say this loosely because yeah, I probably finished books in school because I had to, but not really. Like, there's always skimming. There was not, like, I was never invested in a book, and this was it's a great start for me because I've never finished a book that I actually wanted to read. So this one I'm very excited about because as soon as we started, it was like I just wanted to keep going, and I think it is finding that thing that really connects to you. And I thank Scott for, like, bringing this book into, like, our sphere because I had no idea this existed, and
Yes, I agree.
it's powerful and it's also simple and real,
Yes.
because anyone, whether you're living now or then, it's like the struggle is still the same. It just shifts and it evolves and with time and what's going on in the world, but it's still the same.
Yes, I admire you for facing something head on that, you had some fear about. And that's why Bootsies Book Club and Such, evolved into this, because even for me, I don't read as much as I want to read, and I was more of an avid reader as a younger person. I loved going to the library as a kid. I loved checking out a book, and I loved reading. There was so much time for it, and it took you to so many fantastical places. And as I've, gotten older, that has become less and less in my life.
Mm,
And for me, I'm like you, like always wanting to like really like face some fear, because the fear only we can knock it down.
yeah.
And for me, I'm in meetings and I'm doing the podcast, and I'm always in fear of being a public speaker. And I sit here doing the podcast and I wonder why. Like, I love being here. I love being intimate here with you. And I love sharing, a piece of me with our listeners for Cocoism, the podcast, and now Bootsies Book Club and such. And I've made a goal for myself to honestly confront some of my fears. And if I'm at a meeting, I want to raise my hand, I want to be involved in the book. I want, to work on expanding my vocabulary and my presence for speaking. and my calmness and not really let my nerves get to me. So I appreciate being here with you and us facing our fears together. And here we are,
doing it.
right?
Yeah. And I'm really grateful for, when he brought it up at Bootsies Book Club and such, I was like, okay, here we go. And I think it's important in reading this book and every book that we'll read is to learn something, right? And to take something from each story. And I really think it's important for us to know like a little history on Fire Island. And do you know any history on Fire Island, Boots?
I mean, this and that for sure. I mean, I've heard of Fire Island for so long in my gay life. I mean, we also watched that movie a few years ago about Fire Island.
Yeah.
And
it's more recently, I feel like these things have brought more attention.
Yeah, it's the
To the
the love
Pines.
story of the gays. It's a deadly story. It's every part of the birth of gayness.
Yeah. I mean, in the
Fire Island.
Yeah, the 1920s, queer people like like everyone went there to Cherry Grove, right? And it was like artists and theatrical figures. And then in 1938, there was a huge hurricane that devastated the whole area, which allowed gay individuals to purchase land for very cheap. So 90% of the land was bought by gay individuals. So that's really kind of the start of it. Was like, it started in the 1920s, but it was really that hurricane in 1938 that really gave it its like kind of almost restart, to be what it is today. Isn't that amazing?
What a time to be alive. That's
right. It's like it was wiped away completely. And then as I feel like our community does, like we go in and you rebuild, and you constantly have to rebuild constantly because we live in a world that is not always for us. And I think it's important to always kind of be that way. It's I don't expect anything from people when it comes to like understanding what we went through, what our community has went through that got us to today, because it's sometimes unbelievable. It really is. And even the things that we go through in our lives, it's unbelievable. And the stories are unbelievable. And I think with that, those stories have to be told. I think the worst thing we can do is die and not tell our stories, Then it's a wasted time. You wasted your time. You didn't tell anybody. You didn't teach anybody. You didn't show up for anyone. I'm not saying everyone has to do what we're doing, but teach people,
Yeah.
Period.
It's the history,
Yeah.
The history that got us here.
Yeah. And you were talking about the 2022 film, Fire Island. That was so good.
I love that.
It was with a group of friends.
Yes.
It was on Netflix, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's so many takes on Fire Island and so many stories and so many productions, and it's amazing and I love that film too.
Yeah.
But to close out on chapter 1, I loved this part. And the summer that Louis Darren dressed in gas masks, the summer tank watches and the costs were out, the summer the grocery store changed hands, and people began to worry about the garbage floating 3 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. The summer George Renfrew took the cane house and built a new pool for Esther Williams' party. The summer the new policeman drove everyone crazy, and Horace Jellyby began flying the flag of the country of his lover for 1 week. One only had to see the flag of Argentina to know he had snared the gorgeous physician visiting from Buenos Aires, or the flag of Colombia to know the coach of the national soccer team was in bed at that moment. The summer the models moved to Water Island to get away from the mobs who had started to come this place in great numbers each summer. The summer, two Cessnas collided in midair and the sky rained bodies into a grove of trees where everyone was in the middle of having afternoon sex. This summer, some nameless ribbon clerk died trying to sniff a popper at the bottom of a pool. It was a blur, all of it, of faces and parties and weekends and storms. It vanished, as did all weeks, months, years in New York, in one indistinguishable blur. Life speeded up, life so crowded that nothing stood out in relief, and people waited, as they had one autumn weekend here, for a hurricane to provide some kind of sublime climax that never came.
So good.
Dead, I mean.
It's like almost can bring you to tears.
I know. This is going to be an emotional journey, guys.
Yes. Powerful.
Powerful. We'll see you guys next week, starting with chapter 2 on Bootsies Book Club
and Such.
And let's get into it.